First of all, I'm an architect and a historian, so I ask a lot of why questions. I try to find the context for a building or a place to see, in this case, why was it built here? Why at this time, for these people, in this way? So the learning that I have come to has brought me to this great conclusion that in this time, it was designed and built at a time of rapid change in the city of Los Angeles, from a tiny frontier town to one of the largest metropolises in the world, and robust at that. So this place was built by very young entrepreneurs. I'm going to start with a little history. Many of you know this, so I'll keep it fairly brief, but the newcomers don't. So these entrepreneurs started in the Gilded Age, and they survived a world war, a pandemic, an economic collapse, the invention of motion pictures, the automobile, the telephone, and air flight. And for Virginia, 2 other wars: television, cable TV, the civil rights movement, space flight, and the personal computer. That's a time of incredible change. The position, let's start with the siting of this. The position of this pavilion is art, truly artful. It rests at the highest point in this property. It reflects the main house, but in miniature, making the great lawn seem much larger than it really is. It commands mountain and ocean views, and it's now the centerpiece of 5 of the world's most memorable gardens. So the site is world class. The exterior of the pavilion repeats familiar features from the main house, but improves upon them a lot without embarrassing the original. It reinvents classical elements for the California climate, and it is entirely intact and well conserved, which is super rare. The significant interior spaces of this jewel box are also intact. And so together we're going to explore the shapes, the materials, the details, and countless examples of the building arts that make this small place so delightful. So here's some of the history. Nathaniel Dryden was a self-taught architect and builder married to Helen Brand, whose brother Leslie Brand was a railroad tycoon in Glendale. They emigrated from Missouri to Glendale in 1880. The J.W. Robinsons from Massachusetts to Rosemead came from Massachusetts to Rosemead in 1882. They opened a little place called the Boston Dry Goods Store. Their children, Harry Robinson and Virginia Dryden, met as children. They married in 1903, after which they embarked on a 3-year honeymoon to Europe, India, and Kashmir. Now, who does that? The young, unconventional, wealthy children of the Gilded Age. We're going to see this again and again. Now, the flatland and the foothills we now call Beverly Hills had been the Hamel-Denker lima bean fields since the 1880s. After oil was discovered in Rancho La Brea, the Amalgamated Oil Company bought this whole section in 1900. They spent 5 years drilling for oil and not finding any. But what they did find was water, a lot of water, enough to build an entire city. So they reorganized as the Rodeo Land and Water Company in 1906. By that time, this area was no longer farmland. It was swamps, tar pits, thousands of noisy, smelly wells. But even so, developer Burton Green opened the elegant subdivision of Beverly Hills in 1907. Now, this is the entire city of Beverly Hills in 1936. But it's worth noting, maybe I'll just do this without the clicker. It's kind of a brilliant design where the commercial strip, which was both the electric railroad and what came to be Route 66, or the pathway between basically the East Coast and the beach here in California, ran right through it. The Civic Center was in the center, and there's a commercial strip, and down in here is a commercial triangle. Below here was houses for the middle and lower middle class who would be serving both the commerce strip and the really larger curving streets in the section between what was at one time called the Country Road, and now it's called Sunset Boulevard. So this was sort of the upper middle class, and then these properties above Sunset were even larger and more prestigious. And that elegant plan was especially noteworthy because of the curving streets. No one was doing that at this time. And these streets, once they latched onto the concept, were created by putting garden hoses approximately where they wanted the streets to be, and then they filled them with water. And the garden hoses sort of filled out a really smooth curve, and that's how they marked the curbs and the gutters for the streets that you now travel. So at that time, especially through the Panic of 1907, Burton Green held on to this premise that everything be done in a first-class manner as much as possible, even though he might be bankrolling the first 10 years of it. So in September 1909, Harry and Virginia took a year-long trip to China, and then they returned to stay with Virginia's mother at Edgemont Park, the J.W. Robinson estate in Rosemead. Now, Beverly Hills did not rebound from the Panic as they'd hoped, and so the Rodeo Land and Water Company made a really risky decision, and that was to build the Beverly Hills Hotel to open in 1912 in the middle of nowhere, hoping to bring wealthy visitors to this new, elegant subdivision. So the Robinsons learned about this, and they also heard that the LA Country Club was moving from its old location at Pico and Western.
Oh, wow.
And it was moving to Beverly Hills. So they went on this drive in the evening of January 11th, 1911. That's 1-1-1-1-1. And they never found the club. But they did find this rolling little hill, and they decided they liked it so much that by 10 a.m. the next morning they owned it. Who does that? Young, wealthy, unconventional. And they paid $7,500, which is about $250,000 in 2025 numbers. The deed for this 5-acre parcel required that the residence be built for no less than $10,000, and the excavation must begin by March 12th, and the house must be completed by December 12th. That's really, in my world, really fast. Virginia's father, Nathaniel, had recently designed and built Art Haven. That's in Glendale. And then the Miradero, which on the right, that was the Brand home, which later became the Brand Public Library and Park. Now, these buildings are exotic and grand compared with the home that he built for Virginia and Harry, a modest 12-room, 6,000 square foot home. A year later, first, construction started and they left for Japan. Shortly afterwards, they returned, and on September 30, 1911, they spent their first night in the new house, and they settled in. But then, a year later, they added at the top of the Grand Lawn these 2 lily ponds, a bathing pond, and the pergola structure you see there on the far left. And as you can see, the power lines were still above ground, stretching all across this property. Now, Harry Robinson bought 14 acres more, which he sold in 1912 to two men, Harding and Lombard, for $15,000. That's a lot less per acre than he spent. But Harding and Lombard sued Robinson, alleging that Robinson agreed to sell them 15 acres at $1,000 an acre. They won the case, but Robinson appealed that case to the Supreme Court, and in 1917, the court found that Harding and Lombard owed him $2,000. But instead of paying him the $2,000, they gave him a triangular 3.5-acre parcel of land just north of the bathing pond. So you can see the old lot, which is sort of a rectangle at the end of Eldon, and then that new triangle at the top on the north side. That's the part that they got instead of the $2,000. So just for a little more context for the Robinson home in the first few years, City of Beverly Hills incorporated in 1914. World War I was fought between 14 and 1918. The Spanish flu lasted between 1918 and 1920. Prohibition was law between 1919 and 1933. Women finally got the right to vote in 1920. King Tut's tomb opened in 1922. So in 1880, when LA had just 11,000 people and barely reached Alvarado Street, by 1920, It had nearly 577,000 citizens and was coming all the way close to Beverly Hills, a huge meteoric rise in growth. So as the 20s roared in, the Robinsons decided to use this triangular parcel to build a real swimming pool. So here's the site plan. It's going to be hard to read, but you can see this L-shaped shaded piece is the L-shaped house that we came through. The circle is L in place. There's the great lawn with the two little pools, and then the main pool is the rectangle right there, and then this is the cabana, the first half, which we'll talk about in a second, and up here is Virginia's new tennis court. So I have to ask, since they already had a really good tennis court at the foot of the hill on the west, why do they need a second tennis court so far away? Who does that? Somebody know?
Downhill.
Oh, too far to walk? For your exercise?
To drive everybody down there.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Because the steps and everything weren't existing.
Too much. Good answer. Thank you. All right. So Nathaniel died in 1924 in March. So Harry and Virginia needed a new architect. William Richards had designed a new store for the J.W. Robinson department store on 7th Street in downtown LA. And sort of at the time, sort of in a neoclassic revival. So Harry hired Richards and William Dodd to design the swimming pool, the pavilion, and the tennis court. Now they were mostly commercial architects. They were known for the Brockman Building Annex here on the right side of the left image, and then the Beaux-Arts addition to the Pacific Mutual Building on the lower right, and finally for the San Gabriel Mission Playhouse. And one feature I noted in all of these three commercial projects is they all have 3 arches. The design of the pool pavilion was supposedly based on the Villa Pisani in Montagnana, which is designed by Andrea Palladio in 1552. Here's a sketch of it. Now, you may not be able to immediately see the precedent, so I photoshopped this second version so you can kind of understand what the precedent for the front facade of the cabana might have been. That's just about how it's been organized. So let's start with the pool. At the deep end, there are these mosaic panels, a glazed terracotta gargoyle in the center, which was used as a pool filter. Now you can see the diving board is long gone and the railings weren't there originally. But what is unique about this is this amazing, fully tiled Greek key waterline mosaic, a contrasting gutter mosaic. So when on your way out, take a look at the different ways the mosaic rolls around those features. And then the paving, which was made by the Tropico Potteries in Glendale, is this unique ashlar pattern. Ashlar is where you take rectangles and squares and put them together in different ways. So that's really unusual, and there's a raised curve around it. My firm has designed a few mosaic swimming pools. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get mosaics to wrap the curves and the bends with no cut tiles? This is genius, really beautifully done. Now, because this was in 1925, which was 2 years before Talkies, before The Jazz Singer was released, this became a magnet for silent movie stars and then speaking actors. This one happens to be Roland Young, who was known for playing Cosmo Topper in the Topper film, among many other things, but that was kind of his calling card. So you can see a really early picture of this, even before some of the top pieces were added there on the left. So let's go to the tennis court. This was built just beyond the cabana, screened from view. Again, nobody can see it, so apparently she could play in private. I don't know. So the cabana now, it crowns a series of step terraces up from the main house. It's entirely symmetric. It's got a dominant center. It's got a tall architrave, and instead of the statuary that you might see on the top of a Renaissance palazzo, you see urns, and these at one point had been filled with agave, these giant succulents coming out of those urns at the very top. The details were finer, however. The column on the left is at the main house in the front. the column on the right, is on the cabana. And it also had lots of other really elegant details. You've got stucco box paneling here on the walls, a really delicate dental molding at the top with a very shallow cornice. And then on the right, you can see, first of all, the columns and the arches, but then between the arches, you'll see these frescoes of Renaissance angels blowing trumpets. And I want you to notice the empty spot there under the arch. That's where the in-swinging French doors that we walked through this morning are. The most dramatic feature of this entire cabana are the pocketing French doors. These doors, once you've closed the swinging doors in the center, they pocket all the way to the sides of the building across the windows in the changing rooms. So the opening is entirely, you can see the left, or that's the far right arch if you're facing outward. Nothing, you see nothing but open air, and they did the same thing on the back part. So those back two French doors, which are now these doors that you see, had pocketing French doors. So sitting in that cabana on a summer day, it would be like you were in this beautiful sheltered space with no doors. So for the interior features, originally, again, a little hard to read, the center space is the main room with the fireplace that you walk through. It's just a loggia. It's flanked symmetrically on both sides with what were changing rooms, and then there were two little bathrooms and two little kitchens. And then you can see the terrace on the back, really, really large. So when you walk in, the ceiling beams really caught my attention. And Tim just told me this morning that at one point Virginia had painted that entire ceiling pink. But the ceiling beams, if you go out there on your way out, look at the sides. They are stenciled with crowns, lions, oil lamps, and birds. Now you can probably guess, I love symbols, but you can guess crowns and lions. You sort of know what that means. But an oil lamp is usually a symbol of enlightenment. And a bird is often a symbol of hope or a new beginning. And I can't think that's not accidental. I think these symbols are intentional. The floors are, well, first of all, that's one of the lanterns that Harry brought back from their trip to India that he hung between the beams in that ceiling. The floors are fascinating to me. These are terrazzo, which have been used, actually, it's an Egyptian technique where you put marble chips in clay and then you polish it. And the secret sauce for the polish is using goat's milk. I'm not sure they did it here, but that was how it was originally done. The first use of terrazzo in a residence in the United States was in Mount Vernon for George Washington. But by this time in the West Coast, it was not seen in a residence at all. I think the Vanderbilts had done it on Fifth Avenue back in the 1880s or so, but not out here. Sometimes it would be used in a commercial space, but they did the entire front room in terrazzo. And then one other interesting thing, this is a cast concrete fireplace surround, and these are really simplified Corinthian columns. There's only one volute and one little acanthus leaf, but then they taper down into an octagon at the bottom. So really simplified versions of things you might have seen a long, long time ago. In the corner, a bronze register. Now the register, you see a lot of those today, but it was hiding or covering a Wessex heater, an electric heater, 220 amps, which is super rare, again, in a residence. And it was gravity, so there's no air, no forced air, there's no air conditioning. It was just almost like a 1920s bathroom heater, if you will, but at that time, putting those in a big room in a new house was really unusual. The kitchens, and I took this picture just like 6 months ago, have white tile countertops. That's the original cabinetry. I think the piece on the right with the green formica might be not original, but those are the original glass-fronted cabinets, and both of the kitchens are intact, even though the bathrooms have been remodeled. So early in 1929, just before the crash, Dodd and Richards returned to design a two-story addition to the rear of this cabana. They set it behind the original structure and low enough, you can even see that the ceilings are lower, so you can barely see it from the main house. So all the way down here is the main house, and that's the porch, and this is the side of the L. Up the grand lawn to the pools, to the main pool, to the original cabana from 1925 to the 1929 edition. So you can see how clever they were about hiding it. So again, it doesn't compete with the house. You barely know it's there. Let's see. So once you come through into the new room, which is where we're sitting now, there are 1,000 features to know. Above us is this ornate, it's almost better to look up than the image I've got. It's a plaster ceiling with octagons. That's not so unusual. There's a plaster bas-relief right below it that for quite a while I thought was Lincrusta, which was a Victorian thick wallpaper with texture. But I've been up there tapping on it and it's really plaster. In the center, this is a counterweighted billiard light, which can raise and lower. So when the pool table was here, it would sit really low to the table. But for dancing and for cards and for talks like this, it can easily be raised. There are more bronze registers. And then the floor is linoleum, which I thought was super unusual in such an elegant room. It's in an Italian terrazzo pattern, so it's got a reference, but it's just linoleum, 1929.
Does the light fixture still work?
You know, I didn't try it. I could tell that's what it was. Tim, does it still work?
It's frozen at that level. It doesn't go up or down, and we've tried to have it fixed, but it was going to be extensive and going into the ceiling. And
Yeah.
since we don't have the billiard table, we just did that.
No need? Well, at some point it might be nice, but I think you probably have priorities for conservation here. So let's see. The room is surrounded by mahogany paneling with some really unique features. These engaged columns that you see flanking the windows, it's a really Gilded Age element. It does not belong to 1929, but I think for some reason that was part of the elegance that this room required. On the far right, that's reminiscent of an egg and dart molding. Does anyone here not know what egg and dart molding signifies? So it's a really common molding that has an oval and a little V, and the oval is an egg and the V is a dart, and it means life and death. And so you'll see it, it's been around for centuries, but this one has been reinvented a little bit. It's all flowers. You see the little sort of rose petals in there. So it's egg and dart shaped, but it's got flowers. And then in the middle, there's a technique that we call sgraffito. The Latin word is, it basically means scratching. So where you take parts of the image that you don't want and you scratch it off. And then the image is left, in this case, flat. Sometimes in sgraffito there'll be a shape like a bas-relief that has a roundness to it, but this is just a flat panel sgraffito. Now, flanking the fireplace are these three storage cabinets. The right and the left cabinet are revolving, and they reveal a score card or score chalkboard and the billiard balls and the cues. But the middle panel, which can only be opened by someone in the know who knows exactly where to touch to pop it open, strangely has shelves spaced at exactly the right height for booze bottles. So it's just a wild guess, but who does that? Let's see. Now, at this time, they used bronze French doors. You can't see them here, but the front doors were all wood. But these back doors and their hardware are bronze doors with cremone bolts. Does everybody know what a cremone bolt is?
Yeah.
So when you push the lever down, the pins from the top of the bolt come out of the top of the jamb and out of the bottom, and the door pops open. And they're used on windows also. It's a really elegant, fairly rich way to treat these doors and windows, but it allows you to have much more glass exposed, much smaller muntins across the glass panes. On the backs of these, you'll see, and if you can step out on the terrace, the arches are now painted with birds and swags in what's remaining of the two doors, or three doors, sorry. So after Harry's death, Virginia became chairwoman of the Robinson Company for 30 years. Her niece, Helen Chapman, her husband Philip, and 2-year-old daughter Anne stayed in this house now, which had kitchens and baths and bedrooms for 2 years, just to keep Virginia company for those first 3 years after Harry died. She remained here at Virginia State for another 45 years. She became an active fundraiser and philanthropist. She raised money for many causes, including the Hollywood Bowl. And I'm sure some of you have seen lots of those Hollywood Bowl images from the orchestra would come here and play their evening again for a select group so she could raise money for the orchestra. It was also a treasured gathering place for swim parties, bridge games upstairs, dancing, many costume parties for members of the artistic and political elite. And then a year after her death in 1977, the house was listed and the pool pavilion were listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The gardens, as you know, were given to the County of Los Angeles, and the recent standard of care has been exceptional. The program costs hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. In 2013, Cynthia Carlson and Catherine Fellows converted the side spaces into a caterer's kitchen and bathroom opening to the outside. And on Tim's watch, the pavilion was rewired, heat, air conditioning, the beam stenciling was restored, the painted panels upstairs were restored, the pool was restored, the new roofs were installed, and that's the beginning of a very long list. These spaces are now used for corporate events and wedding showers, birthday parties, and it's sought out for people not so much like the Robinsons, but for people like you and me, because it tells a story about a time, about this place, about a very unusual couple, and about architecture and its details. Every year, 2,000 or more children come to visit this place, and over 3,000 people. Oh, I left one out, didn't I? How did I miss that? Well, I'll come back to that for a second. These are DSOs from the upstairs, which I skipped. That is a faux marble column. Upstairs, the baseboards, a lot of the surfaces in this column are false marble, painted like that. And then they use the linoleum again in the upstairs flooring. Oh, I didn't mention this either. Wow, missed a page. So there are also these hand-painted Arabesque wall paintings all over the upstairs. And there, on the left, there's a menagerie of monkeys and dogs and hot air balloons, animals of all kinds, turtles, and especially, you'll see this painting of Roland Young again, this time in a bird bath. And again, on the back, we never go back there, but I think the back is super interesting. This is a stucco grill that covers the stair windows, and then the back section has a tiled roof, which you don't see anywhere else in this property, and it's got these scrolled bracketed eaves that support it in these sort of octagonal shape. And then the far back balcony. So you can see we've got the fresco angels blowing trumpets and holding hands at the very top. Those are the bronze doors. And then this really robust balcony with the curved ends, these gigantic scrolled brackets, concrete balusters, again, that resemble those in the main house. And then below them, stucco grills into the basement, because this addition had a real basement. And it's mostly mechanical down there, but it's walkable. It's a really big space. So back to that point, this place is shown to over 2,000 children and over 3,000 grown-ups every year. And they come to study the gardens, but they also see the house and the pavilion, sometimes fully open, sometimes not. But this and the programs that the county has done with the Friends is so unusual. Certainly unusual in Beverly Hills, but it's unusual in many places to have this kind of support and this kind of robust programming in a place this isolated and protected. So for your support, for your attention, and especially for the interest in developing these programs, thank you.